Let me tell you something up front. You do not have a money problem, a time problem, or a talent problem. What you have, if you're honest, is a focus problem. You've been trying to conquer the world without conquering your mind first. And let me remind you, you will never dominate outside what you haven't disciplined inside. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your patterns. And your patterns begin with your thoughts. Focus is a decision, not a feeling. Most people wait to feel inspired, motivated, or in the right mood before taking action. They believe they must be emotionally aligned before they can begin to work, build, or create. But the truth is, successful people do not wait for emotions to guide them. They understand that feelings are fleeting, inconsistent, and unreliable when it comes to fulfilling purpose. Focus is not an emotional experience. It is an intentional decision. It's the decision to show up even when you don't feel like it. It's the decision to execute even when your body is tired, your mind is overwhelmed, or your circumstances seem unfavorable. The person who wins is not the one who feels like it all the time, but the one who made a commitment and refuses to back down. Making a decision to focus means you are no longer led by how you feel, but by what you've decided. That's the shift. And that shift determines whether your life moves forward or stays stuck in cycles. The moment you say, I don't move based on feelings, I move based on decisions, is the moment you separate yourself from the masses. Because the masses are emotionally driven. They're ruled by impulse, procrastination, and distraction. They're in constant negotiation with their purpose, depending on whether it feels comfortable today. But the few, those who rise, are the ones who eliminate options. They decide in advance. They plan in discipline so they don't fall to disorder. Focus is a form of obedience to your future. When you choose focus, you're choosing alignment with your assignment. You're refusing to let short-term emotions sabotage long-term results. When you make the decision to focus, you cut off everything that does not support your direction. That includes habits, conversations, distractions, and even relationships. People think focus is about addition, doing more, trying harder, pushing faster. But real focus is about subtraction. It's about removing everything that does not serve where you're going. You can't keep everything and expect to be exceptional. You must decide what matters most and let go of the rest. That's what decision means, to cut off. To decide is to eliminate other options. And that's exactly what focus requires. Focus is the ability to hold a singular direction over time, regardless of resistance. It is the mental toughness to wake up each day and ask yourself, what did I say I wanted? And then act accordingly. Most people don't have a clarity problem. They have a consistency problem. They know what they want, but they let their feelings talk them out of it every other day. That inconsistency robs them of momentum. Without momentum, there is no growth. And without growth, there is no greatness. But when you make the decision to focus, you give yourself the ability to build consistency into your daily routine. And consistency compounds. Over time, it becomes mastery. Focus turns small, disciplined efforts into extraordinary results, not overnight, but inevitably. That's why it's not about whether you feel like it. It's about whether you've decided to live in alignment with your purpose. Every breakthrough you're looking for, financial, relational, spiritual, physical, is on the other side of a decision to focus. The choice to block out the noise, ignore the distractions, silence the doubt, and take control of your attention is what separates the dreamers from the doers. Because the truth is, your future doesn't respond to your intention. It responds to your discipline. You don't need another idea, another opportunity, another open door. What you need is to focus. Decide to do the work, whether you feel like it or not. Decide to stay the course, even when it's slow. Decide to show up with excellence, even when no one is watching. Focus is the engine of transformation. It's not glamorous. It's not exciting every day, but it works. The mind is the battlefield. Every struggle, Every victory, every setback begins in the mind, long before it ever shows up in real life. Most people think their greatest enemy is their circumstances, their background, or the people around them. But the truth is, the fiercest war you'll ever fight is the one between your ears. Your thoughts are not neutral. Every doubt you entertain, every fear you nurture, every excuse you rehearse is a weapon being turned against your own potential. That's why learning to conquer your mind isn't optional, it's necessary. Because nothing outside of you can defeat you until it first gets permission from inside of you. The battles that matter most are invisible, and they're being fought in your private thought life. You will never outperform your mindset. You can work hard, show up early, and even be incredibly talented, but if your mind is filled with fear, confusion, procrastination, or comparison, it will sabotage you every time. Your life is simply the manifestation of your dominant thoughts. You cannot have $1 million destiny with a minimum wage mindset. You cannot expect high-level outcomes while thinking low-level thoughts. Everything in your world rises or falls based on the quality of your inner conversation. That internal dialogue is shaping your identity, and your identity governs your behavior. So if you want to change your actions, you must first change what you believe about yourself. You are not just living your life. You are living the story you keep telling yourself about your life. The mind doesn't care what's true. It cares what you repeat. Repetition becomes reality. If you keep repeating negative beliefs, they become mental strongholds. And strongholds are not just bad habits. They are fortified lies you've accepted as truth. They're the ideas you've allowed to take root in your thinking that now drive your decisions without you even realizing it. The thought that you're not good enough, that it's too late, that nobody will listen, that you'll never succeed, that's not just a passing idea. That's a fortified mindset. And unless you confront it, challenge it, and replace it, it will dominate your future. That's why renewing your mind is not a one-time event. It's a daily battle. Every morning you wake up, you must choose which voice you will amplify, the voice of truth or the voice of limitation. People don't fail because they lack resources. They fail because they lack resolve. And resolve comes from a made-up mind. A person with a focused, renewed, and disciplined mind is a force that cannot be stopped. It's not about being smarter than everyone else. It's about mastering your thoughts and refusing to entertain anything that contradicts your purpose. You have to treat negative thoughts like enemies. Don't negotiate with them. Don't entertain them. Don't give them space. Reject them at the door of your mind. Guard your thoughts like you guard your most valuable asset, because that's exactly what they are. If your thoughts are cluttered, your vision will be blurred. And when your vision is blurred, you drift. When you drift, you waste time. And wasted time is the greatest thief of destiny. Every time you win a mental battle, every time you choose faith over fear, action over hesitation, truth over lies, you are rewiring your brain for victory. You are training your mind to serve you instead of sabotage you. That training requires vigilance. You don't casually conquer your thoughts. You confront them. You interrogate every belief. You ask yourself, is this thought serving my vision or stealing from it? Most people never slow down long enough to evaluate their thinking. They're living on autopilot, unaware that their mental programming is producing the very frustration they're trying to escape. But once you become aware, you can make new choices. You can replace old narratives with new truth. You can take back your mental territory and begin building a mindset that matches the future you say you want. Mental clarity fuels acceleration. When your mind is clear, your actions become intentional. When your actions are intentional, your results begin to compound. Confusion is a form of resistance that slows everything down. It clouds your judgment, drains your energy, and scatters your focus. Most people are not stuck because they lack potential or opportunity. They're stuck because their thoughts are disorganized, their goals are vague, and their decisions are delayed by mental clutter. Clarity is not something that just happens. It's something you must pursue, protect, and prioritize. When your mind is full of unresolved questions, competing priorities, and unprocessed emotions, even the smallest task can feel overwhelming. That's because your brain is trying to operate while overloaded, like a computer with too many tabs open, running slower and slower until it freezes. Clarity begins with deciding what matters most. When you know what matters most, you can ignore what doesn't. You can make decisions faster, communicate more directly, and execute with more precision. Clarity gives you the power to eliminate distractions because it filters your options through the lens of purpose. Without clarity, everything feels equally urgent, equally important, equally worthy of your time. But when you get clear on who you are, what you're doing, and why it matters, you start to see the difference between movement and progress. You stop mistaking busyness for productivity. You stop giving energy to tasks that have no long-term return. You stop investing in people and projects that drain your focus and derail your momentum. Clarity is not about having all the answers. It's about knowing which questions are worth asking. Mental clarity also affects confidence. When you're clear, you stop second-guessing yourself. You stop overthinking every step. You move with boldness because you trust your direction. That trust doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from alignment. When your actions align with your values, your mind is no longer divided. You're no longer pulled in opposite directions by hidden doubts or unconscious conflicts. You don't need external validation because you've already resolved the internal war. People underestimate how powerful it is to simply know what you want and why you want it. That kind of clarity creates calm in the midst of chaos. It gives you the ability to stay grounded when circumstances shift because your focus is anchored to something deeper than your current situation. Clarity is also a multiplier. The clearer your vision, the easier it is to communicate, collaborate, and delegate. People around you know where you're going and how they can contribute. Your team stops guessing, your clients stop hesitating, and your message stops getting lost in translation. Clear leaders create clear cultures. Clear thinkers make fast movers. There is nothing more powerful than a person who has made up their mind and knows exactly what they are doing and why. When you move with clarity, you don't just accelerate your own progress, you accelerate the progress of everyone around you. You raise the standard. You increase efficiency. You model what it looks like to live and lead with intention. Achieving mental clarity requires time, attention, and intentionality. It doesn't come from adding more noise. It comes from subtracting the unnecessary. You have to create space to think, reflect, and decide. You have to audit your inputs, limit distractions, and develop the discipline to sit with your thoughts long enough to find the signal in the noise. That means turning off the constant stimulation, setting boundaries with your time, and learning to say no to what doesn't serve your highest priorities. Most people try to accelerate by adding pressure, but pressure without clarity leads to burnout, not breakthrough. Real acceleration is the result of precise effort, not frantic activity. It's the reward for those who are willing to slow down long enough to define the win, simplify the process, and remove the mental friction that slows everything down. You must master inner dialogue. The voice inside your head is the most influential voice in your life. It speaks constantly, shaping your beliefs, guiding your decisions, and influencing how you see yourself and the world around you. Most people live unaware of how loud and negative their inner dialogue really is. They carry on conversations in their minds that they would never allow anyone else to say out loud. They criticize themselves, question their worth, replay failures, and predict the worst outcomes without even realizing it. The way you speak to yourself when no one is watching creates the emotional climate you live in. If your inner dialogue is filled with fear, doubt, or shame, then your confidence, clarity, and courage will always be compromised. Mastering your inner dialogue doesn't mean pretending everything is perfect. It means taking responsibility for the story you tell yourself every day. It means refusing to let your mind become a dumping ground for limiting beliefs and emotional garbage. Most people let their minds run on autopilot, repeating old narratives that were never true to begin with, because they internalize criticism from their past, absorb insecurity from comparison, and accept thoughts that were planted by fear, trauma, or failure. But just because a thought shows up doesn't mean it deserves a seat at your table. Your inner voice should be trained, not tolerated. It should serve your vision, not sabotage. The moment you stop and listen to what you're actually telling yourself is the moment you begin to take your power back. The thoughts you repeat become the beliefs you live by, and your beliefs drive your behavior. You will never rise above the level of the beliefs you've accepted as true. If you believe you're not good enough, you'll settle. If you believe you're not ready, you'll delay. If you believe you're unworthy, you'll self-sabotage every opportunity that comes your way. That's why inner dialogue is not a small issue. It is the root of your results. You cannot change your life without changing how you talk to yourself about your life. When your inner voice is aligned with truth, power, and purpose, you become unstoppable. You start to walk differently, speak differently, decide differently, and show up with a new level of presence and certainty. Rewriting your inner dialogue is a discipline. It starts by paying attention. Notice the default scripts you go to when you're under pressure, when you make a mistake, or when things don't go your way. Do you speak life, or do you speak limitation? Do you remind yourself of your power, or do you recite your pain? The key to mastering your inner voice is intentional repetition. You must feed your mind with truth daily, even when you don't feel it, especially when you don't feel it. You affirm who you are, what you carry, and why you're here, until it becomes more real than the fear that tries to stop you. You speak from vision, not from memory. Your memory may remind you of where you've been, but your vision must direct where you're going. A powerful inner dialogue doesn't eliminate challenges, but it transforms how you face them. When your self-talk is strong, setbacks don't break you. You stop interpreting obstacles as personal attacks and start seeing them as part of the process. Your inner voice becomes your anchor in the storm. It tells you to keep going, to stand firm, to rise again when you fall. And because that voice is coming from within, it doesn't depend on external circumstances. That's the kind of resilience that creates long-term transformation. It's not about motivation. It's about identity. When you know who you are and you speak to yourself like someone who matters, everything else begins to shift. Your actions catch up to your beliefs. Your energy matches your assignment. Your life aligns with your truth. Distraction is the enemy of dominion. You cannot lead, build, or create anything significant while living in a state of divided attention. Every time your focus is pulled in multiple directions, your energy is diluted. And when your energy is diluted, your effectiveness disappears. Distraction may not feel dangerous in the moment, but it is one of the most subtle and destructive forces working against your destiny. It doesn't show up as chaos, it shows up as convenience. It shows up as the endless scroll, the unnecessary conversation, the urgent but not important task, the mental wandering that steals minutes and eventually takes years. You don't lose your potential all at once. You lose it one distraction at a time. And the tragedy is that most people don't even recognize it until they've settled into a lifestyle of reaction instead of intention. Distraction is a thief that doesn't just steal your time, It steals your clarity, your creativity, your momentum, and ultimately your sense of authority over your own life. Dominion means rule, power, control. But how can you claim dominion over your future if you can't even control your attention? Every minute you spend distracted is a minute you surrender to something that doesn't serve your purpose. That doesn't mean every moment of your life has to be hyper-productive, but it does mean that everything you give your time to is either a seed for growth or a seed for stagnation. Dominion requires discernment. And discernment means knowing when something is simply noise. But just because something is common doesn't mean it's harmless. People are losing their dreams not because they lack talent or ambition, but because they cannot sustain attention long enough to follow through. They start projects but never finish. They generate ideas but never execute. They have vision but lack discipline. Not because they're weak, but because they're distracted. And distraction doesn't always come from bad things. Sometimes it comes from good things that are not aligned with your current assignment. When you don't know what matters most, everything starts to feel important. You say yes to too much, you chase multiple goals at once, and you wear your busyness like a badge of honor while secretly feeling exhausted, scattered, and frustrated. Dominion requires focus, and focus is a form of power. It's the ability to lock in on a goal, a mission, a standard, and give it your full attention until it produces fruit. The more focused you become, the more authority you carry. You start to walk with intention, speak with precision, and act with conviction. People can feel it. They know when someone is present, engaged, and not swayed by every whim or wave of emotion. Distraction keeps you reactive, but focus makes you proactive. And when you are proactive, you stop living according to other people's demands and start moving according to your own direction. You cannot multitask your way into mastery. Excellence requires undivided effort. If you are constantly pulled between notifications, obligations, and interruptions, you will never enter the deep work required to bring your highest vision to life. Greatness doesn't happen in the margins of distraction. It is born in focused hours of commitment. Dominion is not about being everywhere. It's about owning where you are and being fully there. It's about creating boundaries that protect your mind from unnecessary input and learning to say no, not just to people, but to patterns. The pattern of starting over, the pattern of checking out, the pattern of living in reaction mode and calling it flexibility. Every time you choose to focus, you reclaim authority. You teach your brain to value depth over novelty. You become less available to things that do not matter and more available to the work that does. And when you do this repeatedly, distraction loses its grip. You begin to build momentum, and momentum compounds, not because you're doing more, but because you're doing what matters with greater presence and power. Discipline is the bridge between intention and transformation. Everyone has a desire, a vision, a dream they talk about, but only the disciplined see results. Desire without discipline is just wishful thinking. It's easy to get excited about potential, but it takes discipline to turn that potential into performance. Discipline is the daily decision to do what needs to be done regardless of how you feel. It's not emotional, it's foundational. It's the difference between a life that's reactionary and one that's strategic. Most people wait for the perfect moment, the right motivation, or a burst of inspiration to act. But those who win understand that discipline builds the momentum motivation depends on. Discipline shows up first. It creates the structure that allows inspiration to visit consistently instead of occasionally. Without discipline, your life becomes a cycle of false starts. You begin with energy, but without consistency, your progress collapses. The person who trains themselves to be disciplined gains an unfair advantage in every area, because while others are negotiating with their emotions, they are moving forward regardless of them. Discipline is what allows you to keep promises to yourself. It builds internal credibility. Every time you do what you said you would do, even when it's inconvenient, you reinforce the identity of someone who is trustworthy, consistent, and powerful. But every time you break your own word, you erode that identity and begin to see yourself as someone who can't follow through. That's why discipline is not just about action, it's about self-perception. It's about the relationship you have with your own potential. Discipline doesn't eliminate freedom, it creates it. Most people believe freedom is doing whatever you want whenever you want, but true freedom is the ability to live in alignment with your values, your vision, and your purpose without being hijacked by impulses or distractions. Discipline frees you from the trap of regret. It frees you from the weight of inconsistency. It frees you from the shame of knowing you could have done more but didn't. Discipline is the quiet force that produces visible fruit. It's not glamorous, it's often boring, but it's effective. It's the early morning routines, the repeated reps, the uncomfortable conversations, the wise financial choices, the sacrifices no one claps for that lead to outcomes everyone notices. The world rewards consistency, not intensity. Most people can sprint for a season, but very few are willing to build the habits that sustain long-term excellence. Discipline is not about extreme effort. It's about sustainable effort. It's not how loud you are for a week. It's how consistent you are for a year. Discipline helps you stay steady when life is unpredictable. It keeps you anchored when emotions fluctuate, when challenges arise, when temptation whispers. It teaches you to move from being driven by feelings to being led by principles. You start making decisions based on where you're going, not what you're feeling. And that shift is where transformation begins. Because transformation doesn't come from big decisions, it comes from small, repeated decisions made daily, regardless of circumstances. Discipline also reveals what you truly value. What you consistently prioritize is what you've truly committed to. You can say health matters, but if you never train or eat with intention, your actions reveal your truth. You can say legacy matters, but if you keep wasting time and energy on meaningless distractions, you're living a contradiction. Discipline confronts those contradictions. It calls you into alignment. It demands integrity between what you say and what you do. And it requires sacrifice. You have to give up your comfort zone, your excuses, your old habits, and sometimes even your circle to protect your direction. Discipline makes you choose. You can't have convenience and excellence at the same time. You have to choose one. And when you do, your life begins to take shape. Not because everything changes overnight, but because you're finally building on a solid foundation. You're not guessing anymore. You're growing. You're not reacting, you're responding. You're not being tossed around by life, you're taking ownership of it. Discipline is the master key. It unlocks every door you say you want to walk through. The true transformation of your life begins not with your circumstances, but with your mindset, your focus, your inner dialogue, and your daily disciplines. Everything you desire, whether it's success, freedom, impact, or legacy, hinges on your ability to master yourself. You must win the war in your mind, silence the voice of doubt, protect your attention from distraction, and build the consistency required for real progress. Dominion isn't given, it's claimed through clarity, discipline, and intentional living. The gap between where you are and where you're called to be isn't bridged by talent alone, but by the choices you make every single day when no one is watching. You are not waiting on the world to change. The world is waiting on you to rise.